All right, good morning. I'm sort of talking to you, but I'm not. I'm talking to y'all. Thanks. I want to make sure I can see y'all. Thanks for being here. I'm going to introduce the panelists, and I just have a few questions to get us going, and we'll get started. We're really excited to open our conference this year with a panel. So much has happened this past year and a half since we last gathered. For farmers, food security advocates, and really anyone who eats, it's been hard to keep up with all of the changes and challenges. So we chose the common good as a theme. It's very broad, we understand that, but it feels like we're all looking for ways that people, groups, and communities are making that happen in spite of all the challenges that they're facing. So we're inviting the conference attendees to explore how different parts of the food system are working to achieve the common good. On this panel, we will hear from 3 distinct experts in their field to understand the intersectionality between food access, policy, farming, and faith. So let me introduce the panelists. Patrick Brown is the owner and operator of Brown Family Farms in Warren County, where he and his family farm 165 owned acres and 385 leased. With roots dating back to 1865, Brown Family Farms has a deep legacy of agriculture producing wheat, soybean, oats, field corn, and industrial hemp. Dr. Derek Hicks teaches and researches broadly in the areas of African American religion, religion in North America, race, the body, religion and foodways, theory, and method in the study of religion, Black and Womanist theologies, and cultural studies. Currently, he serves as the co-chair of the Religion and Food Group at the American Academy of Religion. Hicks is the author of the book Reclaiming Spirit in the Black Faith Tradition. And Wendy Peters Muschetti leads with a passion for building sustainable food futures, both in her work and at home in Colorado. As part of her role, she develops and pursues partnerships with private and public funders to ensure organizational sustainability, cultivates vision and strategy across the organizations, and oversees state and federal policy advocacy to advance nutritious food access that brings health to people and farmers. So I'm going to start with you, Patrick, since you're sitting right here, and then we can just kind of move on. The first opening question is, if there's anything I missed in your introduction on how you touch the common good in your particular area, what are you seeing from your perspective within the food system that is a threat to the common good?
Well, primarily what we see now currently is not enough food being produced from local landowners to be able to provide quality nourishment to their community. Being a produce farmer, an aspect of our business is to make sure we provide food to rural food sovereign areas that are dealing with food insecurities. And if we don't grow anything else, we always make sure that we at least have a certain amount of acres dedicated to the community so that we could offer them a community-supported agriculture system where the member of the community is able to come directly to the farm and purchase directly to be able to provide quality food instead of picking through local grocery stores in areas where the security continues to be an issue. So that's one of the things that I primarily see now is that we have to get back to the land and grow our own food.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Hicks, same question. What do you see as a threat to the common good right now, and especially in the last year or so?
So I'm the less practical among these wonderful colleagues that I have to the left and to the right, because I'm thinking more in terms of the function and nature of religion and how that interplays with foodways as a cultural production, how people think and kind of govern themselves around food consumption, food creation, as it were, from the ground, and cooking and full cultural arrangements around food. But I think one of the threats has already been articulated, but also the way in which we posture ourselves around food, right? So my kids know at certain points during the year what I cook. And they come to me. My daughter says, "Daddy, it's time for your pinto beans. Dad, it's time for you to when are you making the gumbo?" Now, this is inextricably tied to a kind of cultural tradition that precedes her and me in my family, because I learned how to make those foodstuffs and others from my grandmother, who was 97 years old and still living, and she learned them from her grandmother, Mama Carey, who lived a long life and was formerly enslaved. And so without my children knowing it, right, they are participating, and hopefully I'm grooming them to participate in foodway traditions that are not only about sustaining the body, but also sustaining the spirit. And I'll speak more to that, but that's one of the things that I think that, when we think about what is being lost in terms of access, we're also losing things in terms of the production of and the making of the food in and of itself.
Thank you. Yeah, and the importance of that food memory that shows up for everyone in this work. Wendy.
Sure, thanks, yeah. So I'm the executive director of a statewide nonprofit, Nourish Colorado. I'm also a mom and a wife and a pet owner and all those things. But so my answers are going to focus a little bit more on like the structural things that we're seeing as a statewide nonprofit advocacy group right now. And I don't know if I'd call it like a real threat, but maybe a big challenge that I've been reflecting on recently is sort of coming within our own movement. I think there's some pretty obvious threats. The obvious ones I'm probably not going to speak to. I think there's real obvious threats coming from external factors right now. But when I think about the movement over the past year, and like writ large, the movement we're a part of is like, we want to end hunger with good food. So think of like that is the movement I'm talking about. And I think about the crises that happened in 2025 with H.R. 1 and with the immediate and the pending, cuts to SNAP program, immediately followed by a government shutdown that actually paused the SNAP program, right? These real crises. And what we saw, and I bet we're not alone in Colorado, is like a real loving response to that. We saw government, we saw charitable food, we saw advocates, we saw frontline organizations really come together and say, we really want to feed people right now, right today. But what I also learned from this moment is that there were a few cracks in the system here, right? We saw people coming together to feed people, but we saw actually a lot of time and money and resources going to the really big, well-established organizations and kind of missing some of those smaller, nimble, frontline organizations that were feeding primarily immigrant populations, for example. So what we saw is that, and we also saw funders coming to the table, and we heard this, and we were not alone, is that we saw funders giving away a lot of resources to that immediate emergency food need, and then the money was gone. So there are organizations that are working really hard to do like long-term systems change work that is just as necessary so that we don't ever have to be back in this situation again. And we heard from funders, we gave all our money away. We're done for 2025. We can't really invest in that kind of work right now. So what I saw is that from within our own movement, not only did we not have like a unified food security emergency response plan, maybe more importantly is we didn't have a shared vision, right? There's a lack of understanding, at least from I'm seeing our work, of like, we don't even collectively understand like what is charitable food and what is it really good at, and what are government food benefits and what are they really good at, and what are neither of those things really good at when we want to do food systems and we want to end hunger kind of work. So I think the threat that I'm seeing is that from our movement is that, or what I'd like to see, I guess, and we don't currently have, is a shared vision and a shared strategy of how we are going to end hunger with good food together. So government can say, here's how I know how to contribute. Philanthropy says, here's where I know how to get in and be effective. And collectively, we can feed people today, but we can also invest in the work for tomorrow so that, again, we don't have to worry about feeding people so much today.
Can I jump in? Because what you just said also reminds me of the extent to which there is food access inability, issues, we'll just say. I don't want to say full food insecurity, but access issues in places that we also don't expect, like college campuses. I have a daughter who has a full meal card at USC, University of Southern California, and she's a freshman, and we're not even through a full year yet, and several students are already applying for EBT cards because these tend to be black and brown students who either run out of their pit swipes, as we call them at Wake Forest, or the equivalent to that at whatever institution, or are finding insufficiency in what is being offered but don't have access financially for supplementation and the ability to cook their own food. So I think that's another issue that needs to be addressed as well.
Right. Yeah, and I think, Wendy, you brought up a lot of the unexpectedness of last year and how those policy decisions really impacted us. And we can go on and on about how that stretched us. I guess I'm wondering, starting with you, Patrick, kind of what happened last year and any policy decisions that affected you, but how you pivoted and how you shifted and how you kind of figured it out and made it work, or where things just didn't work, and that's okay too.
Yes, so what our understanding of it is short-term support is going to come from government-funded organizations. But what we have to do as a diverse farm operation is to not always withhold the government for support. We have to be well diversified in order to continue business. That's one of the ways that I have seen our farm grow over the past 4 generations, that a portion of which I've been alive, is that we don't put all our eggs in one basket. We have to be able to pivot based on policies. Policies that affected us the most in the past year or so was the shutdown of the LFPA grant that allowed us to support schools, local school systems with food. But the way to pivot is you have support that's established through NGO organizations like the Food to Faith Partnership through RAFI. That solidification 3 years prior to last year's disposal allowed us to always have a market regardless of government policies that go into effect that could hinder us if we only had one way of serving food to the community. So it's very important as the new up and coming or the next generation of farmers is to always be as diversified as possible so that if policies come into effect that can hinder your operation, you are able to continue producing.
Thank you. I think that's a hard thing to do as well, but I'm hearing it being well diversified, don't put your eggs in one basket, and I'm thinking about the nonprofit community that responds to all of these needs. And so I'm wondering, Wendy, if you have any thoughts on that, because that's also hard for nonprofits to have to try to do all of it. I mean,
it's hard on everyone, and I so appreciate that you brought up LFPA and the massive disruptions that brought, especially to our smaller farmers everywhere and across Colorado as well. So, actually, I might take that a slightly different direction, if that's okay, in terms of those policy impacts and how we respond, and just obviously there's a lot of really, really harsh policy impacts coming, and there's also some really good things happening I'd love to share at the state level. But one thing that I think that I am elevating now, because I think I don't talk about it enough and I want to talk about it more, is we talk a lot about the immediate impacts, like policy impacts, right? The lost programs, right? We lost LFPA funding too, right? We also we were the state SNAP education implementing agency. So that's the largest public nutrition education program. That program was immediately unfunded in HR 1, right? So we paid for 16 people that immediately lost their jobs, or at least by the end of September. So we talk a lot about that impact, which is real, right? At a time when the federal government is telling people, you need to do more to feed yourself healthy food, but we're going to give you less. The federal government terminated the program, SNAP Education, that's actually built to help people do more with less. And we talk a lot about those community impacts, which I think is so important, but I think the thing we're not talking a lot about is like those really personal impacts, like that this was truly sad. This was devastating. We felt like a family and we lost family. There was real trauma living inside of our bodies and my former coworkers' bodies now from just losing their jobs. And there's so much fear now and lack of trust of like coming back into that system. So part of the good thing is we're lucky in Colorado. We passed a ballot measure last November that is actually going to continue universal free breakfast and lunch, going to fund a statewide universal local food and schools program, and it's going to help rebuild and fill some of these SNAP cuts, right? And rebuild a community-based nutrition education program. Yay, thank you, yes. Yay, I'm so glad. And that's like the good policy impact. But in the meantime, what we're seeing though, we're seeing this personally, is that we are seeing the people that are losing their jobs and exactly the people that we're also hearing a lot, maybe you're like, I don't want to come back into this. I have lost trust and faith and confidence. This is too chaotic. We are losing queer folks and we are losing people of color. And these are the people that we're losing in our team and in our staff and saying, this is too much for me to come back to. And I just think that's something that like us and with others, we really want to examine more about who is really personally feeling this impact in addition to really deep community impacts.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for kind of holding that too, absolutely. I kind of want to pull back and think what history can teach us and how we can kind of move forward from that. So Dr. Hicks, I have a question specifically for you. As the epicenter of the civil rights movement, the Black church established sovereignty for Black Americans. And as food and land become inaccessible, as Patrick was saying, how has the Black church continued to be a pillar for the common good? And what kind of stories can we remember to use as motivation going forward?
Do not ask long questions of a Baptist preacher. Dr. Harris, I got 3 points. Somebody been in church, take your time. So I want to speak to that through the lens. I started with my grandmother a moment ago, and I want to frame for our conception, before I go to the history, which I'll go to momentarily, the nature of the church I grew up in South Central Los Angeles as a child. El Bethel Missionary Baptist Church. I was baptized at El Bethel in, I won't give the year, I'll just say I was 7 years old. And this gray is real, so you can imagine. But what I recall about the purity and the nature and the function of the church at its best extended beyond those church four walls, the sanctuary, the dining hall or what have you. It extended to my grandmother's porch. And on her porch was a central communal site, a locus of feeding the spirit and the flesh. My grandmother would feed you pinto beans and collard greens even as she prayed for people who had yet to expunge degradation from their lives. That was happening simultaneously. For anyone who has read the Pulitzer Prize winning book Beloved and understands the nature of Baby Suggs Holy in the clearing, that was what was happening on my grandmother's porch intentionally. So much so that my grandfather, they bought the house in 1950, by the mid-1960s, he extended the porch and added an awning and a large bush to block the sun from one side so as to create a space for my grandmother to extend and expand this work as an extension of the church. I mentioned her greens. Part two of that is much of what she was feeding in terms of vegetables was grown in her backyard. And so what you had was a locus of feeding spirit and flesh that was happening both in her kitchen and in her backyard. Now, where did this come from? You know, if I asked my grandmother, why did you grow a garden? Was it to push back against racist systems and the man, right, which I did do? She would look at me like I was an idiot. She was like, I grew up during the Great Depression. So I grew a garden because we needed to eat. Because coming from a system of repression created a cognitive value for her of sustenance, which is what you were speaking to, that was multifaceted, right? So what my grandmother was responding to, and here's the historical moment, was what folks have in the church and outside of the church have been responding to through the civil rights era. So I'll end with a couple folks. Number one, we like to think about 1954 as the watershed moment where this young 26-year-old preacher, newly minted PhD from Boston University, who nobody knew, but was put up as the pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, just before the Montgomery bus boycotts, right? We love that story of this young, handsome man with his beautiful wife named Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But what we don't think about is the pastor who was put out of that church before him, Vernon Johns, who was standing at the entrance of the church in farmer's garb, passing out produce to parishioners who were in their Sunday best, and he wasn't. He was dirty from the fields. Because for him, the church had to be about social entrepreneurship, land sovereignty, control of food. And so for Vernon Johns, it was about a merging of what the function and nature of the church was as an extension of itself in and through the people who came on Sunday, but also in the community, which was picked up by Fannie Lou Hamer and the Freedom Farm Co-op. Fannie Lou Hamer understood the power of Mississippi Delta land ownership as a fuel for the movement. And when the movement started to unsettle after Martin Luther King's assassination and re-articulate itself around poor people's needs, she started a large co-op that included both cash crops and foodstuffs for those who couldn't even afford $1 a month to be a part of the co-op. Not to mention her work with Dorothy Height to start a pig farm, or pig bank, excuse me. So I think all of these things, all of those two historical moments are testaments of the nature of the coalescence between faith and spirit and church and food as and sovereignty and ownership as a way to feed the whole person. I could speak about Albert Klieg and the work that he did in that, and I could even speak about the Black Panther Party and the Free Breakfast Program and the work that they did with churches to secure it.
Thank you. So you mentioned farmers coming into their churches and selling, and I think there has been over the years sometimes a disconnect between faith communities and the farmers that are growing the food. Patrick, I know you've been working with churches more in the last few years. So, well, and how many pastors are in the room, if you don't mind? All right, and a lot of church folks. So what do churches need to know about farmers and how they can actually show up and support that market access work and that sort of thing?
Well, if they're not already participating in Rafi's Food to Faith Partnership, it's very important that you have some type of means to create your own. And the first step is identifying the local farmers that are in the counties of where you worship. And that is coming to our farms and seeing how our operation runs and what products that we offer to the communities to be able to create a Food to Faith partnership, or just continue to support Rafi's and incorporate your church into Rafi's Rolodex of churches that can offer that type of assistance. I think programs like that are very important to the community. I'm a preacher's son myself. My father, the late Reverend Dr. A. Brown, that was one of the things that he always did as well. It was to not only have church on Sundays or Wednesdays, he would also have church in the community for those that could not come to his church due to illness, not having proper transportation. And then he would also bring produce with him when he visited those members of his community. And some of the things like that I watched growing up as a kid, I understood that not only do farmers provide food, but we also have a means to provide service to the community. And that is very important, and allowing your kids to see that type of leadership so that when they become adults, they'll know that that's also a process that is embedded into the family's belief system. And I think that that's one of the most rooted and grounded things that I, as an adult, feel obligated to do, not only farm, but also be a service person to my community.
And for church leaders, if I can add, because it's so important to understand that for those of us who are unfamiliar with being farmers or farming in and of itself, farmers are welcoming us to come out to see the inner workings of the farm. I take my students from my culinary culture and black religious experience class to Sankofa Farms, and now I got another farm I hope we can go to. But Kamal Bell welcomes my students to come out, understand the inner workings of how farming is happening at the farm, but also distribution. And he puts them to work. I told my students, don't wear those nice Jordans to that farm, because they're gonna come back with red clay dirt, and a couple students still went with their Jordans on, and Kamal Bell sure did put us to work. But it was important for them to see, but also from the farmer's perspective, it's important for them to show us what is happening on the ground.
Can I add to that? Is that okay? Just thinking from sort of like the advocacy perspective as well, is how important it is then for policymakers and legislators to get out and see farmers and what farmers are doing as well. So that's one thing we also we do have those connections as a statewide organization. We work with our state legislature, we work with our federal delegation, and that's one way we can at least try to use those connections, and connecting our policy work with our programmatic work is if we ever have a chance to make that connection, to organize like site visits or tours or whatever, like let's get our policymakers and our funders to the farm to see so you can be seen and they can see what's going on, for sure. So a lot of people need to be doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Wendy, we'll stick with you. So how do you balance, because it kind of goes back to this, don't put all your eggs in one basket, which is really hard to do. How do you balance the work of policy engagement and information and just keeping up with everything, along with meeting the ongoing needs of the people that you're serving?
And I really wanted you to ask this question because it's something I think about all the time, and then I could only think of, we don't.
Yeah.
Like, we do not balance all of those things. That is not a thing. But I think it's a really, really important question. I did want to talk about it. So, because we do, as an organization, we're running programs all across the state. We run farm to school programs. We run SNAP incentive programs. We did nutrition education. And then we try to connect all that to state and federal advocacy. So, and I will tell you too, is like, especially this year, like we're doing a worse job than ever to jump to the chase, right? Because we're so busy like responding to crises all the time and yet we're still trying to do the work, that we're moving so fast that I think we're not being great communicators. We're really not engaging our partners in ways that we usually do, worse than ever right now. But what I think when we're kind of at our best or moments like this is like, how can we if we go to DC, our commitment is if we go to DC as staff, we always bring a partner. We bring a farmer, we bring a SNAP shopper. Let's at least integrate. Let's spend all the energy we can on doing site visits to get legislators to like see this good work on the ground. And then like, we've tried to really simplify things because it is so much. So one thing that we did as an organization is the last week of January 2025, we started a weekly action alert called Rooted in Action. And we kind of did this for ourselves, right? Like there's so much coming at us. We cannot respond to this. We can't keep track of it. But we said, you know what? We're going to do once a week. We're going to send out an action alert, and it's going to be bilingual, and it's going to be simple. And it's going to be really straightforward. Like what is like one thing that we can focus on this week? And I think since the last week of January 25, I think we've skipped maybe 2 weeks. Which is sort of sad because it's a reflection of like how much we actually need to respond to. But that's one thing we can do. It's like simple, it's consistent. We have like over 500 people get it, like signed up to get it, which sounds really small, but they opted in and they all share it. So we're just going to try to find those kind of things that we can keep doing amidst all of this noise.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I think that's the part that we see a lot. We work with a lot of food pantries, and we hear, we're just so busy feeding folks that I don't even know how to translate what we're seeing there. And so you mentioning just bringing someone with you on visits and getting connected and finding other ways to kind of make their voices heard and sharing their experience and sharing their stories is absolutely important. So thank you. Patrick, you've mentioned this a little bit, but what, like, in terms of the last year and thinking about those decisions that you have to make on what markets, what relationships to invest in, what decisions do you have to make as a farmer where it feels like the common good is in the crosshairs? So when you decide to grow one crop over another or sell to one market versus another?
Yeah, and I think it's more so when we go over our budgets at the end of the year to identify what markets we can make a real impact in. What takes away of that what adds to that takeaway is the inflationary costs to do business. Right now, we're dealing with high diesel fuel costs that we didn't expect during budgeting time. So we also have to understand the global markets of fertilization for crops that we plant and the pivot areas of where we can not put a high input on certain crops to be able to have a successful year as far as profitability. So I think inflation costs and the risk of things that we can't control, climatic weather events, that's something that we really can't control, but we can have preventative measures and insurance that is affordable for small growers or large growers. So it's tools in place that we have to play around with, but understanding the supply and demand market is very important. I always refer to macro and microeconomics to understand what that market can carry for our farm to continue to be in business, but not only just be in business, but to profit. So it goes all the way back to administration and policies. I mean, that really is the things that is not a risk for the climatic weather as much as policy that, is adding to the things that we can't control. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times, if you have to pivot during the season, it can hinder the most important markets that you have. So, yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Hicks, I think the reason I invited you here is because, religion is really important to folks, and it motivates us to make the decisions that we make that impact how we buy our food, who we're engaging with. And so in that, how does religion and race and class shape who grows our food and how we eat it?
I was just thinking the other night about how much I paid. I ran to the store, I won't name the store, just to get some blueberries. That's all I wanted, just some blueberries. Because all of the pundits tell me how good they are for me in my high protein yogurt. And I grabbed those blueberries and I scanned to pay, and I said a word that I can't say in church. Because those blueberries were $7.99. And my son and I will tear those things up, and it won't feel like I should have spent $7.99 for those. And let's just say I bought those blueberries in a section of Winston-Salem. For those of you who don't know, there's a section called 5 Points. And in 5 Points, you have several stores. You have a Harris Teeter, a Publix across the street from a Whole Foods, around the corner from a Trader Joe's, where there on the other side of that is another Harris Teeter. And if you feel like walking it, you can walk from one Harris Teeter and traverse all those stores to the other Harris Teeter and not break a sweat if it's not too hot. And that section of town is right next to or adjacent to what locals call Buena Vista, and me being from Los Angeles, called Buena Vista, where the average house price, let's just call it above $1 million per house. So they can walk. And it gets me to thinking about the nature of race and how those dynamics play themselves out. And it reminds me of conversations that I've had conversations I've had with folks like Heber Brown, who I know folks in this room know well. And Heber, he can get excitable about the difference between a food desert and food apartheid. Because to Heber, as he articulates it, a desert is a naturally occurring thing. And it can be beautiful. And therefore, to articulate lack of access as a desert is to confuse the situation as though lack of access to food is a naturally occurring thing. And yet it ain't. Therefore, what we are seeing in these communities, if in fact we can understand them as intentional, then we've got to see them as food apartheid, which has an element of being systemic and institutional. Choices were made to include 5 stores, 3 of which are what we understand as kind of bougie stores. Even if you don't want to include Trader Joe's, I'm from Los Angeles, so I grew up on Trader Joe's. I know
Joe's
it's
is bougie.
It could be a little bougie, yeah. And yet go 1.5 miles east, and there be nothing. And so race plays a role in that, but also the church has traditionally played a role in filling that gap, in creating points of access. Going back to traditional folks' gardens in their backyards. These gardens were not just about sustaining themselves, they were about sustaining the communities, and they were extensions of what was happening in the church. And so to mitigate systemic issues prevailing that are inextricably tied to racial discrimination, the church has traditionally, I'm not saying it does now, traditionally functioned as a way to mitigate and offset some of what was happening in the community. And I think there are models I've already articulated historically that get us back to that, but also, look, I can do better myself. I grew up with a garden in my backyard. When we would be playing down the street, which is another thing, as a kid, we played all day long. When we would be playing down the street for hours on end and hot, we would run to my grandmother's backyard without asking her to break off some sugar cane that she was growing in the backyard to suck on it and then go back and play, right? We didn't realize in the moment how revolutionary that would be 20, 30 years later. But I can do better to model that tradition myself in my own way, in my own community. And so these are the things that I think the church needs to do.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm hearing church operating as a point of access, but it goes further. It's how we create those access points and how we treat folks that are coming in too. It's not just having access, right? It's how we do that and support it too. And that's a big piece.
And that speaks to, I don't know if David Harrison is here. No. A former student of mine who, when he took my first culinary culture class, he and another former student decided, conceived of as their final project, what it would look like to create a mobile food pantry that went to the community, that first engaged the community around what they needed. And that culminated or manifested in New Communion, which is still running today. But you're right,
Wonderful.
that it requires, the last chapter of the book I'm writing now, I talk about about a hunger game that is happening in black communities. And that is, you have a lot of well-meaning folks who don't know the community, who will go to the community and say, y'all just need to grow some kale in your backyards or some stuff in some gardens in your community. And those folks, well-meaning though they may be, have no understanding of what the community, the folks in the community have been doing for years. There is brilliance in this room of unsung folks who've been growing gardens on their own for the last 30 years. And so if we have, so if there's a disconnect between the well-meaning, funded nonprofit representative and the folk who have been doing the work in the community all along, then we will never bridge the gap fully and truly. And so it requires cooperation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Wendy, I have a question for you, and it's kind of thinking about this. So when the common good is not met or considered, who wins and who loses?
So I thought about this question too, and I thought, the same as it ever was, right? I mean, and if I'm reading your question correctly, right, it's like, I feel like we are currently living in a system of winners and losers, right? And when the common good isn't met, I don't see that changing. And I think what you're trying to go here with this amazing and beautiful conference is not this concept of like the commons, right? This concept of the commons, I'm totally completely messing up like undergraduate economics here, but right? The notion of like the commons was, oh, if we have a shared field and we each put a cow in it, like we'll all be okay, right? But it didn't take into account that some people maybe can't get a cow in the first place, right? Or some people can get a better cow than another cow. Or some people, like if this field gets ruined, they can just go somewhere else with their cow, right? This is this totally false notion of like the commons. And I think what you're trying to do here is different, right? It's the common good, right? So that if we actually build a system, we build structures that intentionally, right, work for those who are currently marginalized, that intentionally remove oppression, that actually you're going to be building a food system that works the best for everybody. I hope I'm reading you right
absolutely.
on that one.
No, I was not thinking of the commons, common good as in a food system that works for everyone, which means that some people might feel like they have to give things up, but it's not actually giving up if it's cooperation and it's sharing, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we are getting at, right? And that it means sometimes people get nervous to let things go, because if I don't have this and someone else does, I think it's like a pie, right? And it's not a pie. And that if we go into more of an abundance mindset and thinking that there actually is more, then that will actually shape how we approach the food system, right? And absolutely.
We will all be better off by
Yes.
the metrics. Yep.
So I'm going to ask one more question for all three of you, and then we're going to open it up if folks have questions for our amazing panelists here. So where are you finding hope or glimpses of this common good? And where is the solidarity and the partnership that moves that work forward? Start with Patrick.
Well, I think people identifying what the real issues are in their community, and they're actually doing something about it. They're standing up, they're advocating for it, especially whether it comes to advocacy for BIPOC producers or food insecurities. I just really see that in the last 5 to 10 years, people are starting to see, especially the younger generation, are starting to see the effect on how things are being done in this country. And I think that supporting various policies that can help support the actual values and issues that are occurring in the community, I think I see a good positive impact and change that may be coming throughout the sporadic future. Mm-hmm.
Similarly, I'm seeing hope in my students who are doing a great job of connecting the dots between consumption of food, the cultural production of food as a way of experiencing their communities and where that food comes from. So wanting to connect with farmers and distributors and all of those things. Students come in often to the conversation only having experienced kind of one element of that, and now they are expanding their minds by seeing the interconnected nature of these things, and that gives me hope when I can have a student reflect on something in my class that they had already experienced through eco-womanism from my colleague Dr. Harris's class. I can see the ways in which they are tying these loose ends together and realizing they ain't that loose and that they need to be tied.
Thank you.
These are all beautiful things giving me hope. Being here, seeing this, being a part of this is such a blessing. This right here is what gives me the most hope. And I think it sounds a little corny, but every day what gives me the most hope and those sort of glimmers of hope is going to work with my coworkers and being around my people, and being reminded every day there's so many people working on this. And I think that's one thing that I hope we've always done, but we've tried to be really intentional about this year of all years, is that there's just so much noise out there. There's so much we could be doing and should be doing and all that. But let's start with us and let's model with like each other and our team. Like, how can we run an organization full of love and care and understanding? And that's like structurally about our PTO and our mental health days and our 401k, and like all of that really, really matters, so that we're creating an environment where we can come together, bring our best, and be real with each other. And that's the kind of stuff that's given me hope.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. I have one more. So, it's, because it just made me think, like, you, all three of you, you're probably not going to be sitting next to each other again. You know, we have someone who's a farmer, we have a professor, and we have someone, a food policy advocate. You're out there, you're feeding folks. What do you need from one another or from folks here? Like, what's really gonna feel like you've got the support that you need to keep going?
Good question. I would say just sharing the stories of generational farms that are still doing the work. I think in my particular case, is very important because a lot of times, you know, we're stuck in the field. We don't have time to market. If we offer an event to the community, we would like people to show up, you know, and support those farms and try to find a local CSA in your community and support that. Create a subscription service and become a member. And I think that's very important as well.
So I've taught my culinary culture and religion class for many, many years, but it took about the 5th class for me to finally say, wait a minute, my students need to go on a farm. And so what I needed for myself was to connect those dots myself and expand my imagination about what it means for my students to experience what is happening on the farm. And of course, I need a farmer to, or a farm to be willing to have us come be a part of that. But also, I need my students to think critically about putting those dots together and come up with projects that are practical, that would work with organizations that are addressing policy issues. And so that starts with a need for me, but it also requires institutions like Wake Forest University, where I teach, and others, to be open to allow students to engage in that kind of practical work. And of course, we need organizations to partner with us to get that type of pedagogy off the ground.
Thank you. Wendy?
Well, I actually immediately thought I need to be sitting on your grandmother's porch. That's what I really need for my soul. But that sounds. But as sort of an organization, I feel like sometimes we get kind of just stuck in our way of like, this is how to run a meeting, this is how to meet with a legislator, and this is how to do policy advocacy. And what I need, I think, is actually learning about more and historically of like how we really do make change together. That there's so many ways to tell your story, so many ways to get to change together. And I think I need more of that from our faith leaders, our community leaders, our farm partners, and innovate a little bit more.
Thank you. Well, you heard it. They said the things they need, and so it's y'all's job to show up for folks like this and for each other. Show up, support farmers, go visit farmers, tell your stories, ask people for their stories as well, and for institutions to be open. I heard that too, and showing up where that's needed. Does anyone else have any last word?
Just to that last point, that as with everything, we've got to adjust and adapt. I was a teenager before my grandmother actually bought everything from the grocery store, because we went to a butcher for this, and we went to a meat fisherman for that. But people are doing what you're talking about, tastings and things like that. Social media, folks in social media are offering cooking classes through social media to really show people the difference and get them to encourage them to cook.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. You good?
My guess is people want to brag.
Okay. Hey, please, they came here, they shared their stories. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all.